I want to help us look at Abraham Lincoln's unusual Thanksgiving Day proclamation. Unusual because he instituted a nearly religious national holiday, and unusual because of the values and the ideas he used to do so. Now, Lincoln's two greatest speeches are the Gettysburg Address and the Second Inaugural Address. They have become American beacons of light from an extraordinarily dark time, our Civil War. The ideals enshrined in those speeches are enacted in at least two practical proclamations, the Emancipation Proclamation and this lesser-known Thanksgiving Day Proclamation. In these, Lincoln took practical steps towards the two goals of the Civil War, freedom and union. The Emancipation, of course, was about freedom, and the Thanksgiving Proclamation was about union, the reunion of the divided country. We don't want to be sentimental here. Abraham Lincoln is not the poster boy for Norman Rockwell Thanksgiving, but he is the author of the day. Now, his Thanksgiving Proclamation in October of 1863 was done in the same year, made famous by the Emancipation Proclamation and the Gettysburg Address. 150 years ago, Lincoln's two proclamations and one address changed America. In calling for a national Thanksgiving Day, he gave us an almost religious American holiday. That's doing something. Lincoln is often seen as a folk hero. For many, from Marilyn Monroe to Leo Tolstoy, as an icon also of wisdom and virtue. But as I say, we don't want to get sentimental here. After all, Lincoln was an elected political official and not even a Christian in any formal way. Yet we hunger and thirst after a righteous way of life and community that we feel ebbing away. Lincoln has what I call a secular religious voice, and his words can help us find our way. Well, what was going on for Lincoln when he signed this famous declaration a week after the urgings of the famous editor Sarah Hale? What was going on in his situation? What was he thinking theologically and politically? At that time, following his Thanksgiving Act and his Gettysburg speech, Lincoln had a 3-week convalescence. He was suffering from a mild form of smallpox, and in a rare time of semi-solitude, he had much on his mind. But mainly what he had on his mind, what he was thinking about, was what he called the greatest question ever presented to practical statesmanship. What was that? It was how to bring the South back into the United States. He could think ahead because there were significant Union victories at Gettysburg, Vicksburg, and in Tennessee with Sherman and Grant. The invasion of Georgia was about to start. The end of the Southern Rebellion seemed to be coming, although the bloodshed and the loss was to be overwhelming still, almost insupportable. Lincoln had hard choices to make about what to do with the South, and he had folks on his left and on his right ready to pull him apart. Radical abolitionists wanted to make the South a national occupied zone ruled by Congress. Radical Democrats on the other side seemed to want to bring the South back into the Union as if nothing had really happened. Maybe even Jefferson Davis taking his old seat in the Senate from Mississippi. Lincoln found a middle way, and his core guiding ideas had a lot to do with his Thanksgiving Day Declaration. We will look at those ideas and the man who held them. Lincoln was not a vindictive man. He was not the kind of God-fearing person who wants to put the fear of God into others. He did not feel he could speak for God or punish those whom had offended God, even as he felt he knew who had offended God, which was all of us. Yet he had much more of a mother's heart than a father's anger. His childhood life shows us why this might be true, with his loving mother and stepmother and his difficult father. His ideas for reconstruction, of bringing the country back together, start with an even-handed respect for the future lives of all the people. From the inner heart of this man, we see the ideas of loving unity and harmony in his mind, in his nature, and in his desires. Externally, as he looked outward, he had ideas of a positive view, of a larger world, and of the American dream. We can see this in the things he calls Americans to be thankful for. The expansion into the West, even during the war. The lack of international enemies and a wider war, even when many in England wanted to aid the South and to widen the war. He is thankful for the rise in population, even as the death toll has mounted on the battlefields. And he is thankful that the scope of the war is narrowing, the theater of the conflict shrinking. And he mentions that there is more freedom in America than before, his oblique reference to the Emancipation Proclamation. But he does not rub it in. He does not mention that there are now 100,000 black soldiers killing Southerners. He does not name northern wins as victories over an evil South. He does not gloat over the completion of the Iron Dome of the Capitol building and the Statue of Armed Liberty atop. Rather, his idea is that this Civil War is the result of our perversity, our betrayal of the divine purposes of peace and harmony. And yet, while we are being punished by our war because of our estrangement from the divine, we can give thanks for nature's bounty and those political and cultural things that offer us hope and union. This is a remarkable theme. The war is from our perversity, and yet he calls us to do something good and to do it together. Lincoln brings these ideas home in his second inaugural. The war, he says there, is what the biblical God would give in exchange for justice, the ending of the evil of slavery. All the blood of the war is being balanced with all the blood of slavery. It is within that context, then, that Lincoln asks his country to join in thanksgiving, as he will call us soon to act with malice towards none and charity towards all. These are biblical and religious notions that thanksgiving can come out of suffering and loss, and out of what can then become our humble and redemptive heart. There's nothing sentimental then here in Abraham Lincoln, his offering us of a national day, a civic day, a secular day, clothed in spiritual and religious meaning and history, truly an American hybrid. For Lincoln, by the way, the day was more for unity and reflection, for thanksgiving and praise, than for food. He was an indifferent eater. His young secretary, John Hay, talks of Lincoln eating apples and sometimes a potato for supper. He was not much for state dinners, and he was a man with no body fat, as we would say. So it's not a big meal he offers, but big ideas and a big heart in the midst of real suffering and in the midst of real political differences. Now, to talk here with you about Lincoln is for me just another wonderful experience of being drawn close to this great, good, and complex man. A man who could think deeply, as Shakespeare said, feelingly. All my life there has been, as there has been for many others, an almost mysterious attraction to Lincoln, a need to know him, even to feel his presence, as I have, walking the land of his childhood home in southern Indiana, or sitting as I did one evening, the evening of my 50th birthday, under an orange full moon at the Lincoln Memorial. I can understand how people as different as Marilyn Monroe and Leo Tolstoy can be enraptured with this tall, dark, and strange president. The more I think about Abraham Lincoln and Thanksgiving, the more I see that it is from his humility, honed in suffering, that he was able to call his country, this country, together for the higher purposes of gratitude, the practice of a heart that includes harmony, that includes the enemy. What we can learn from Lincoln and his melancholy ways is that sorrow and suffering can open the human heart.